It's late. The road stretches out in front of you, empty and endless. The radio hums quietly, and the rhythmic sound of tires on asphalt feels almost hypnotic. Then, out of the darkness, you see someone standing by the roadside. Maybe they're waving, maybe they're just standing still. You slow down, your headlights sweep over them, and you see a figure, usually a young woman, dressed in pale clothes, maybe soaked from rain, maybe shivering. You pull over because it's the right thing to do. You unlock the door. She gets in the back seat. Her voice is soft, almost distant. She says she needs a ride home. You start driving, the silence feels heavy, and when you finally glance in the mirror, she's gone. The seat is empty. The door never opened. The road is silent again. This is the story of the Phantom Hitchhiker. It's one of the most famous and enduring urban legends in the world. From the United States to Japan, from South Africa to Scandinavia, it's told and retold with eerie similarity. A driver, a lonely road, a mysterious hitchhiker, and a sudden disappearance. It's a ghost story that seems to live in the space between guilt and fear, between compassion and horror. What makes it chilling isn't the ghost, it's how ordinary it all feels. The setting is familiar. The act of kindness feels natural. And then, reality twists. The American version is probably the best known. It often takes place on a rural highway or near a small town. The hitchhiker is usually described as a young woman wearing white, sometimes a prom dress, sometimes a wedding gown, sometimes just plain clothes but with an old-fashioned look. The driver picks her up, talks to her briefly, and drives her home. When they arrive, she's gone. Confused, the driver knocks on the door of the house. An older woman or man answers and listens patiently before saying something that freezes the blood. That's our daughter. She died in a car accident years ago on that very road. That story told in hundreds of small towns goes by many names. Some call her Resurrection Mary, a spirit said to haunt Archer Avenue near Resurrection Cemetery in Illinois. Others know her as the Vanishing Hitchhiker, a story first documented in American folklore studies in the 1940s. But the roots of this legend stretch far beyond American highways. Versions of the same story have been told in Ireland, in Mexico, in the Philippines, and in Japan. The names and faces change, but the ghost always does the same thing: appears, accepts a ride, and disappears before reaching her destination. Imagine being that driver. You can almost feel the damp seat where she sat, the faint smell of perfume lingering in the air. Sometimes, in older stories, she leaves something behind, like a scarf, a handkerchief, or even a book. The driver brings it to her home, trying to return it, only to find it displayed in a glass case or on a gravestone. Other times, she leaves nothing at all, only silence, and a question that no one can answer. Folklorists have spent decades studying this phenomenon. It's considered one of the clearest examples of a modern ghost legend, one that evolves with time but never dies. Early reports date back to the 1800s, long before cars. Back then, the hitchhiker was often a traveler or a stranger who asked for a ride on horseback or in a carriage. Even then, they vanished before reaching their destination. When automobiles replaced carriages, the legend adapted perfectly. The ghost simply moved to the back seat. The core of the story speaks to something universal: the fear of isolation on the road and the unknown that waits in the dark. Driving alone at night already stirs unease. The mind fills the silence with imagined shapes. A figure by the roadside isn't just a person, it's a reflection of that fear. The Phantom Hitchhiker gives that fear a face. It's the road itself made human. What makes the story even more fascinating is how believable it always feels. The Phantom Hitchhiker isn't described as a grotesque or monstrous ghost. She looks alive. She speaks normally. She's polite. She asks for help. That detail makes her disappearance more shocking because it violates what we trust: our senses, our kindness, our logic. A driver who stops to help is acting out of decency, yet the result is something supernatural. The legend forces us to question whether compassion can lead us into danger, whether even a good deed can open a door we shouldn't open. Take the case of Resurrection Mary, one of Chicago's most famous hauntings. Reports began in the 1930s when multiple drivers claimed to have picked up a blonde girl in a white dress along Archer Avenue. She would ask to be dropped near Resurrection Cemetery, but by the time the car reached its gates, she was gone. Some drivers said they saw her vanish before their eyes. Others claimed to see her walking through the cemetery's locked gates. Decades later, witnesses continued to report seeing a woman in white walking along that same stretch of road. Whether fact or fiction, the legend became so well known that the cemetery itself drew tourists and believers eager to catch a glimpse of the ghostly hitchhiker. But the story isn't limited to America. In Hawaii, there's the tale of the Peel hitchhiker, mysterious woman said to be the volcano goddess Peel herself, appearing as a hitchhiker dressed in red. Those who pick her up are warned never to speak ill of her, or their car will break down before reaching safety. In Japan, the tale becomes darker. There, it's often a yurei, a vengeful spirit of someone who died violently, often appearing to drivers near tunnels or bridges. In Mexico, it might be a bride who died on her wedding night, still trying to reach her groom. Across Africa, there are stories of soldiers or travelers asking for rides and then vanishing, sometimes leaving behind tokens from another era, medals, hats, even bullets. The consistency of this legend across cultures suggests something deeper than coincidence. It reflects the shared human experience of travel, the solitude of the road, the vulnerability of being between destinations. The car becomes a small, private space where the real and unreal can meet, a place where time feels suspended. The Phantom Hitchhiker story thrives in that space. Even psychology offers clues. Some experts see it as a manifestation of survivors' guilt, a cultural way of processing grief over road accidents, which became common after the rise of automobiles. Highways are modern liminal spaces, transitional zones, where life and death meet. People die there every day. It's no surprise, then, that ghost stories cling to them. The Phantom Hitchhiker could also represent lost souls seeking closure. In many versions, she isn't malevolent. She's simply trying to reach home, to finish a journey she never completed in life. Her disappearance isn't an attack at a reminder that she doesn't belong to this world anymore. That makes the story tragic as well as terrifying. Sometimes, drivers claim to feel a chill before the ghost vanishes. Others say they hear a faint sigh. In a few rare stories, she speaks one last line before disappearing. Something like, "This is where I died." These moments stay with witnesses for life. Some are so shaken that they stop driving at night altogether. What's remarkable is that new sightings still happen. Even in the age of dashcams and GPS, people report seeing figures by the roadside that vanish when approached. Sometimes, they even catch a glimpse in the rearview mirror, just for a second before it's gone. Technology hasn't killed the Phantom Hitchhiker. If anything, it's given her new roads to haunt. So next time you're driving alone on a dark highway, remember this story. The world outside your headlights is deep and silent, full of things you'll never see until they're already there. Maybe it's just a shadow, a trick of the eyes. Or maybe, for a moment, you've crossed paths with one of the oldest travelers in human imagination, a spirit that never stops walking, never stops waiting for a ride. If you want to keep exploring stories where reality meets the supernatural, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Belmoze, because sometimes the scariest ghosts aren't in haunted houses, they're sitting quietly in the back seat. Every culture has its version of the story, but the moment is always the same. A lonely driver, late at night, sees someone standing by the roadside. The figure is pale, almost out of place, usually a woman dressed in white or light-colored clothing, sometimes carrying something small, a purse, a shawl, or a book clutched tightly to her chest. The driver slows down, rolls down the window, and offers a ride. The figure climbs in silently, gives an address, and the car pulls away. What follows seems normal until the moment the driver looks back and the passenger is gone. But in many retellings, the ghost doesn't simply disappear. Before vanishing, she speaks. Her voice is calm, steady, and unnervingly clear. She doesn't scream or plead, she delivers a warning. Sometimes it's personal, a message meant only for the driver. Other times, it's something bigger, a prophecy, a glimpse into disaster that has not yet happened. That's what makes this legend so enduring. The Phantom isn't just a lost soul. She's a messenger from the grave. One of the most famous versions comes from the United States during the 1930s. A man driving home from a party late one stormy night saw a young woman walking along a dark stretch of Archer Avenue near Chicago. She was barefoot and wearing a light dress soaked through from the rain. He offered her a ride, and she accepted quietly, saying she was headed home to her parents. The drive was long, and the rain beat hard against the windshield. When they reached the entrance of Resurrection Cemetery, She whispered softly, "This is where I must get out." Before he could stop the car, she vanished from the seat beside him. The man, shaken, went to the cemetery the next day and found her name carved into one of the gravestones. But a lesser-known version of that same story adds a detail that changes everything. Before disappearing, the girl allegedly turned to the driver and said, "Be careful at the crossing ahead. Death waits there." 2 weeks later, that same driver was killed in a car accident at a railroad crossing just a few miles from where he had picked her up. To the locals, it wasn't coincidence. It was warning fulfilled. Across the world, the phantom hitchhiker takes on different faces, but the theme remains constant. The living receive a message from the dead, and the warning always comes true. In the Philippines, there is the tale of a soldier who picked up a woman crying by the roadside near a cemetery. She said her husband had died in an accident there and begged the soldier to drive slower. "Speed kills," she whispered. As he slowed, a truck roared out of a blind curve ahead, missing them by inches. When he turned to thank her, the passenger door was empty. The seatbelt still fastened, but no one inside. The soldier never forgot her voice. In South Africa, the Uniondale Phantom is said to appear to motorcyclists on long, open highways. She is described as a young woman with brown hair and a soft voice who asks for a lift. Writers say she warns them about the dangers of going too fast, then disappears when they hit a certain point on the road, the exact spot where a young woman died in a crash decades earlier. Locals who live near the area claim that she isn't trying to frighten anyone. She's trying to stop them from sharing her fate. There's a striking pattern in all of these stories. The ghost never lies. Every time she speaks, her message carries truth. Whether it's a warning about a deadly turn, a future tragedy, or a moral lesson, her words are always fulfilled. That reliability gives the legend its strange power. The ghost becomes less of a haunting and more of a supernatural intervention, as if death itself allows one final act of communication, not to harm, but to protect. In the religious sense, some see the phantom hitchhiker as a form of divine mercy. A restless spirit, unable to move on, is given one last chance to do something good, to save a life, even if it's just one. In rural Christian communities in America and Europe, storytellers often describe the ghost as an angel in disguise, sent to warn those straying from faith or moral order. The warning might sound simple, slow down, or don't take that road, but the implication runs deeper. It suggests that some boundaries exist between the living and the dead, and that sometimes those boundaries can be crossed when a message is too important to stay buried. Yet there's another layer, a psychological one. The phantom's warning isn't always literal. Sometimes it mirrors the driver's own fears or guilt. A man who drinks before driving might see a ghost telling him to stop before it escalates. A woman grieving a loved one might meet a spirit that urges her to forgive or move on. In this way, the legend becomes a reflection of the conscience. The phantom is both an external ghost and an internal one, shaped by what the living fear most. Take, for example, a case from England in the 1950s. A taxi driver in Kent claimed that one night, while driving along an unlit rural road, he saw a woman in distress waving him down. She climbed into the back seat, shivering and silent. When he asked where she was headed, she said softly, "Please be careful. Something terrible will happen at the bend." Moments later, a truck swerved across the road, nearly crashing into him. When he looked back, the woman was gone. The next morning, he returned to the same road and learned that a fatal crash had occurred at that very bend the night before, a young bride killed on her way home from her wedding. He'd been warned by the dead. There's something deeply human about how these stories are told. They combine fear with compassion, horror with purpose. Unlike vengeful spirits or malevolent hauntings, the phantom hitchhiker carries sorrow rather than hate. Her mission isn't destruction, it's remembrance. She reminds drivers and listeners of mortality, of how fragile life is, of how one wrong turn can end everything. In Japan, a version of the legend known as the Kaden no Ana follows a similar pattern. A young woman, often in traditional clothing, appears by deserted highways at night. She asks for a ride home, but before disappearing, warns the driver about a specific danger, like a collapsed bridge or a storm ahead. In some cases, her message saves the driver's life. Locals believe these spirits are women who died suddenly and violently, often on the road itself. They wander the place of their death, unable to rest until they prevent another tragedy like their own. The legend endures because it taps into a primal fear shared by everyone who's ever driven alone at night. The isolation of the road, the hum of the engine, the way the darkness seems to swallow everything beyond the headlights. In that emptiness, the idea of meeting someone, anyone, can feel both comforting and terrifying. But when that someone speaks and their words strike too close to home, it's no longer just a story. It becomes a message. Drivers who experience something they can't explain often don't talk about it right away. They second-guess themselves. Maybe they were tired, maybe it was a trick of the light, but deep down, the warning sticks. They slowed down on that stretch of road. They tell others, they remember the voice. And that's how the legend stays alive, through memory, fear, and the quiet possibility that the dead still care enough to speak. The phantom hitchhiker doesn't haunt to harm, she haunts to remind. Her voice carries across decades, languages, and continents, always delivering the same message. Pay attention, take care, your time isn't guaranteed. In every version of the story, her purpose is the same, a warning spoken once, then swallowed by the night.
It usually begins the same way. A quiet night, a long stretch of road, and a lone figure standing beneath the pale wash of headlights. The driver slows down. Maybe it's raining, maybe it's cold, maybe it's just instinct, the simple human urge to help someone in need. The figure steps closer, often a young woman, pale and soaked, sometimes clutching her coat, sometimes trembling. She asks for a ride home. Her voice sounds distant, calm, maybe even grateful. The driver nods and unlocks the door. She climbs into the back seat, and the journey begins. For a while, everything feels normal. She might mention where she lives, or say something vague like, "It's not far." The driver makes small talk, but her answers come in short, almost hollow phrases. Some versions say she stares straight ahead, never blinking. Others say she looks down at her hands, or out the window, watching the darkness pass by. But the key moment always comes when she gives a destination, a specific address, a real place, a house that exists on the map. It's not random, it's familiar, local, something that feels rooted in reality. That detail is what makes the story so unsettling. It ties the ghost to a physical place. When the driver finally reaches the destination, everything unravels. Sometimes the car stops at a small farmhouse with the porch light still burning. Sometimes it's a suburban house on the edge of town. In some versions, the driver turns around to tell the passenger they've arrived, only to find the back seat empty. No sound, no door opening, no movement, just absence. The driver steps out, confused, maybe thinking the hitchhiker ran off, or that something strange just happened with the locks. They knock on the front door, still holding their keys or jacket, expecting maybe an awkward conversation. But what greets them is something else entirely. The door opens. A tired, older person, sometimes a mother, sometimes a father, stands there. The driver begins to explain. "I just gave a young woman a ride. She said she lived here." The homeowner pauses. There's silence. Then with a heavy voice they say the line that every version of this legend builds toward. "You must be mistaken. My daughter died in a car accident years ago, right near that stretch of road." The details differ depending on the country or the time period, but the structure remains almost identical. The ghost always points back to the place of their death. The haunting is anchored to that moment of tragedy, as if the spirit never truly left. Folklorists call this kind of haunting a residual haunting, where the ghost repeats a loop of behavior tied to trauma or unfinished business. But in this story, there's more than repetition, there's a plea. The ghost isn't just replaying the past, it's asking to be taken home. Think about the psychology of that. The driver becomes an unwitting participant in someone else's tragedy. Their car turns into a vessel that carries a lost soul from the site of death back to the place they once belonged. The act of kindness, picking up a hitchhiker, becomes a symbolic bridge between life and death. And that's what gives the Phantom Hitchhiker story its strange emotional power. It's not only about fear, it's about empathy. The driver means no harm, they're doing something good, but the world punishes them with the impossible. Imagine it. You're the driver. You remember the sound of her voice, the chill in the air when she got in, the faint smell of wet clothes. You drop her off, but she's gone. You stand there, heart racing, listening to the quiet night. Then the door opens, and you're told she's been dead for years. Every small detail floods back. The way she looked, the way her tone seemed distant, the way her reflection never quite appeared in the rearview mirror. You realize you weren't giving a ride to someone living. You were completing something unfinished.
Some drivers report that the ghost leaves a trace behind: a scarf, a purse, a book. In one American version, the driver finds a jacket in the back seat and brings it to the address the ghost gave. When the mother answers the door and sees it, she gasps it was her daughter's jacket, buried with her years ago. In another case, the driver drops off the hitchhiker at her home, but when she vanishes, he goes back to the road and sees flowers or a cross marking the site of a crash. The connection between the living and the dead becomes physical, undeniable. These small tokens fabric jewelry, even the memory of a voice anchor, the legend in something tangible. They make the story feel real, as if it could happen to anyone. And maybe that's why people keep retelling it. Because it doesn't sound like a dream or a fantasy. It sounds like a quiet moment of kindness that goes wrong in the strangest, saddest way possible. Folklore experts point out that these stories often arise in communities with strong local identities, small towns, where everyone knows the major roads, the landmarks, and the tragedies. When a fatal accident happens, especially one involving a young person, the grief leaves a mark. The community remembers the legend, becomes a way of keeping that memory alive. Instead of fading away, the story evolves into a haunting. It gives the victim a form of continued presence, not through horror, but through recognition. In some cases, people even start visiting the supposed site of the haunting. They bring flowers, leave notes, or drive the same route late at night just to see if they feel something strange. That cultural ritual returning to the place of death mirrors the ghost's own story. Both the living and the dead are drawn back to the same spot, unable to let go. The story's power also lies in how it merges logic and the supernatural. Everything up to the disappearance makes perfect sense. A driver picking up a hitchhiker is a normal act. The address is real, the conversation feels natural, the home exists. Then, the truth breaks that pattern. The ghost isn't random, it's connected to that home and that road. That connection makes the event feel personal and believable, even to skeptics. If you look closer, the motif of returning home shows up in ghost stories across the world. In Japan, there's a tale of a spirit who rides with taxi drivers in tsunami-struck areas, asking to go home, only to vanish mid-ride. In Ireland, the banshee's wail often leads travelers toward the site of a recent death. In Mexico, the legend of La Llorona tells of a weeping woman who wanders near rivers, searching for her lost children, asking strangers for directions home. In each case, the ghost isn't attacking, it's searching. The haunting becomes an expression of longing, of disconnection between life and death. That's what makes the Phantom Hitchhiker so hauntingly human. She's not just a warning about picking up strangers. She's a reflection of loss of people torn from their lives to find rest. The driver, the stranger, becomes the medium through which that story is told again and again. Every retelling replays the same tragic journey, from the crash site to the doorstep, from death back to memory. And maybe that's why the story endures. It's not just about the supernatural, it's about how the past refuses to stay buried. Roads are built over old tragedies. Houses stand where grief once lived. The ghost's presence reminds us that the world keeps moving, but the dead still have stories to finish. So the next time you drive down a lonely road and see a figure by the side, think twice. You might be looking at a shadow of someone who never made it home. And if you ever hear a quiet voice ask for a ride, remember the road remembers too. If you enjoyed diving into this eerie part of folklore and want to hear more about the stories that blur the line between life and death, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Belmoze. Because sometimes the ghosts we fear most aren't haunting graveyards, they waiting at the side of the road, hoping for one last ride home. The most disturbing part of the Phantom Hitchhiker story, ESNT, just the ghost's appearance, ESNT, is a moment when the driver realizes that no one else saw what they did. Imagine this, you're driving home after a long night, maybe from a late shift or a family gathering. The highway stretching ahead in the pale beam of your headlights, you spot someone standing by the roadside, a lone figure, perhaps a young woman in a light-colored dress or a soldier in a tattered uniform, someone who looks stranded, vulnerable, and out of place. You slow down out of instinct or decency. The figure gets in, maybe even thanks you, their voice quiet, almost tired. You exchange a few words. They might mention they live just up ahead or that they need a ride to the next town. You nod, focus back on the road, and keep driving. When you finally glance over, again the seat is empty. The car doors are locked. The windows haven't been touched. They're gone. That's the moment where horror becomes real, not in the ghost itself, but in the proof that something impossible just happened inside your own car. The space feels colder, heavier, and you start to question if you imagined everything. You might pull over, step out, check the back seat, even open the trunk. Your breath visible in the cold air? Nothing. Just silence and the hum of the highway. For most witnesses, that instant shatters something internal, the understanding that reality is stable, that perception is trustworthy. Police reports and local legends from around the world share strikingly similar details. The driver always insists on the same thing. The hitchhiker was real. They saw their face. They felt the weight as the person sat down. In some accounts, the driver remembers the smell of wet clothes or the sound of shoes squeaking against the floor mat. These sensory memories make it impossible to dismiss the event as imagination. And yet, when investigators search for fingerprints, footprints, or any physical trace, there's nothing. It's as though the person never existed at all. Psychologists often interpret such experiences through the lens of cognitive dissonance, a term that describes the mental discomfort of holding two contradictory truths. The driver knows they saw someone, but evidence insists they didn't. That tension is unbearable. Some drivers break down crying. Others become convinced that the ghost is still nearby, maybe sitting unseen in the back seat, watching them. There's even a pattern in police accounts of people abandoning their cars by the roadside, too shaken to continue driving. They prefer walking under the open sky to sitting one more second in that haunted metal shell. In one documented version from the 1930s, a man driving outside Chicago picked up a young woman wearing a light coat on a cold, wet night. She gave her name and address, and they spoke quietly about the weather. She seemed grateful, but distant. When they reached her house, the man turned to tell her they'd arrived and found the seat empty. The door hadn't opened. Puzzled, he knocked on the door of the house, where an older woman answered. When he described the girl, the woman went pale. Her daughter, she said, had died in a car accident on that same stretch of road 10 years earlier. That story became one of the earliest Resurrection Mary tales, but it's just one of hundreds like it. In the southern United States, drivers describe soldiers in Civil War uniforms appearing on misty nights, asking for a ride home before vanishing near old battlefields. In the Philippines, the ghost is sometimes a woman, drenched in rain, who disappears just before a dangerous curve, as if warning the driver to slow down. In parts of Eastern Europe, it's a cloaked monk who vanishes at the gates of a cemetery. The cultural symbols differ, but the structure of the experience, the appearance, the ride, the disappearance, remains consistent. This shared pattern suggests something deeper than coincidence. Anthropologists have argued that the phantom hitchhiker myth evolved as a reflection of guilt and empathy on the modern road. Highways isolate people. Drivers often pass by those who need help, fearing danger or robbery. The legend of the vanishing passenger might be society's way of processing that guilt by turning the ignored stranger into a ghost who refuses to be forgotten. Yet for those who experience it firsthand, it doesn't feel like metaphor. It feels personal. Take the case of a long-haul trucker in Arizona who swore he gave a ride to a man carrying an old briefcase. The man talked about seeing his wife again, about how he'd been waiting years for this journey. They drove for almost half an hour before the trucker noticed that the man had gone silent. When he turned to speak again, the passenger was gone, but the briefcase was still there. Inside, it was nothing but a folded, yellowed photograph of a woman standing in front of a gravestone. The name on the stone matched the driver's passenger manifest for the day. That single detail, the presence of a physical object, pushes the story into something that can be explained by stress or hallucination alone. What makes these encounters truly terrifying isn't just the ghost, but the isolation that follows. The driver, often dismissed or mocked, becomes the only living witness to an impossible event. Friends might joke, police might shrug, but for the witness, the experience lingers like a splinter in the mind. They replay the drive, the conversation, the moment they looked away. They try to find the flaw in their memory, some trick of light, some lapse in attention, but there isn't one. The disappearance is total, precise, undeniable. That uncertainty gnaws at the psyche. You can almost hear it in the quiet hours afterward, the questions looping endlessly. Did I imagine it? Was it real? If it was real, what did it want from me? It's not just fear anymore, it's existential dread. Because if one part of reality, something as simple as a car ride, can collapse into the impossible, what else might be false? What else can vanish without warning? Even skeptics admit that these stories share an unnerving emotional truth. They don't rely on gore or violence. Their power comes from disorientation, the moment when logic fails and the ordinary turns strange. You don't need a dark mansion or ancient curse for horror. You just need a moment on a lonely road, a stranger in need, and a truth that can't be proven. Drivers who've lived through it often refuse to take passengers again. Some stop driving that road altogether. Others, in a twisted echo of the ghost's warning, become the ones who tell the story to others as if passing along a curse of awareness. Because once you've looked into the eyes of someone who shouldn't exist, once you've felt the weight of a person who isn't there, you can never again trust the space beside you. The phantom hitchhiker doesn't just vanish from the back seat. It vanishes from the rules that keep reality comfortable. And when that happens, you're left with only yourself, your doubt, and the endless empty road stretching into the dark. The phantom hitchhiker legend isn't just an old ghost story that refuses to die. It's a reflection of a fear that still lives deep in every modern traveler. Even with highways lined with LED lamps, GPS maps glowing on dashboards, and music playing through Bluetooth speakers, there's still something haunting about the open road at night. That endless stretch of asphalt and silence has a way of stripping people back to something primitive. Alone in that darkness, it doesn't matter how advanced the world gets you, can still feel small, watched, and uncertain of what's out there. This story endures because it preys on that exact feeling. Every version of the phantom hitchhiker reminds us of the same truth. Once you leave the city lights behind, logic becomes fragile. In the middle of nowhere, surrounded by emptiness, the human mind begins to fill the gaps. That's why even in the age of dash cams and smartphones, drivers still tell stories of picking up someone who vanishes, or of seeing a figure walking along the roadside that's gone when they turn around. The legend continues to thrive because it gives form to a feeling that technology can erase the fear of isolation and the unknown. Driving at night is already a strange experience. The car's headlights only show a narrow tunnel of vision, and everything beyond that is black. Your world becomes small, just you, the hum of the engine, and the faint reflection of your own eyes in the windshield. Every shape, every tree, every distant signpost takes on a life of its own. If a shadow moves unexpectedly, your pulse spikes. It's easy to understand how the idea of a ghostly hitchhiker took hold and never let go. The legend takes that tension we all feel on lonely roads and personifies it. In a sense, the phantom hitchhiker is the modern traveler's campfire tale. It's told in every culture, in every era, but the story always fits the time. In the early 1900s, it was a pedestrian walking on foggy rural paths. In the 1950s, it became a woman in a white dress by the highway. In today's world, it might be someone spotted on a security camera, standing motionless by the roadside before disappearing. The ghost evolves with us, always staying one step behind our newest sense of safety. Psychologists often describe the legend as a metaphor for liminal fear, the anxiety of being between safe places like home and destination or life and death. The open road is that in-between space, a moving threshold where control feels uncertain. When we drive, we trust the machine, the map, the rules of the world to stay steady. But the phantom hitchhiker breaks that illusion. She enters the car-hour bubble of safety and quietly destroys the idea that the world is predictable. That's what makes her terrifying. Not because she's violent, but because she violates logic. You can't prepare for something that shouldn't exist. Imagine this. It's late. The sky is heavy with clouds, and your headlights reflect nothing but the white lines rushing beneath you. The road seems endless. You haven't passed another car in 20 minutes. Then you see a faint shape up ahead, someone standing by the shoulder. You slow down. Maybe it's a trick of the light, or maybe it's really someone stranded. You pull over, your tires crunching on gravel. They don't move until you roll down the window. When you ask if they need help, they whisper an address. You agree. You unlock the door. You drive. That scene, repeated in 1,000 forms across decades, captures a universal anxiety, the uncertainty of doing the right thing in a world that docility always makes sense. The driver's good deed turns into an encounter with the impossible. It's not punishment hits revelation. The legend taps into our fear that kindness might expose us to something beyond comprehension. That's why the story still works. It doesn't just frighten Matt. It forces us to question our place in a world that feels rational but is still filled with mysteries we can't explain. And it's not just about ghosts, it's about trust. Every driver who stops for a hitchhiker is taking a risk. Every traveler on a dark road trusts that what they see is real. The phantom hitchhiker shatters that trust. She represents how fragile our confidence in reality really is. Even with cameras and lights, the moment we're alone in the dark, our primal fears return. That fear isn't about death, it's about doubt. Doubt that the world obeys the rules we've built around it. In a modern sense, the phantom hitchhiker has also become a reflection of our relationship with technology. Cameras, phones, and navigation apps promise control. But when stories surface drivers claiming they saw someone appear on dashcam footage for only a split second before disappearing, they shake that illusion. The ghost now exists in pixels and video frames, not just in folklore. We record everything, yet we still can't capture the truth. The haunting has evolved into the digital age, proving that mystery adapts faster than our machines. The fear of the modern road isn't about superstition, it's about vulnerability. Cars give us speed and distance, but also separation. They isolate us. When you're driving at night, even surrounded by cities and cell towers, you're still just one person in a small metal shell hurtling through darkness. The phantom hitchhiker steps into that loneliness like a whisper from an older world. She reminds us that progress doesn't erase fear, it just hides it under layers of convenience. Every retelling of the legend reinforces that feeling. A driver alone, a stranger appearing, an address that leads to a grave. It's a loop story that mirrors the endless looping roads we travel every day. And perhaps that's why people still share it. It gives shape to the nameless anxiety that comes with being alone, far from safety, where help is too far and silence too deep. It makes the invisible fear of modern travel visible, personified in a single pale figure waiting by the road. Even as time moves on, the story doesn't fade. From America to Japan, from Europe to Africa, people still report seeing her. Always different, always the same. The ghost that rides but never arrives. The story that refuses to stay buried because the fear it represents never truly disappears. We may not believe in ghosts, but we still look twice when we see a shape on a dark road, just in case. So the next time you're driving late at night, when the road feels longer than usual and the silence grows heavier, remember, the legend isn't just about her, it's about us. About what we fear when no one else is around. About how even the most rational mind can crack under the quiet weight of the unknown. If you found yourself pulled into this eerie journey through the shadows of the modern road, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Belmoze, because the next time you find yourself alone on the highway with nothing but the hum of your engine and the darkness pressing in, you might just remember this story and hope you never see someone waiting by the roadside, asking for a ride that ends in silence.